Hello. In the Crown of Aragon 639 years ago, it was December 29th, 1387. My name is Jonathan Seyfried. I'm a PhD candidate in history at the University of New Mexico, and this is The Historian's Notebook, a podcast about how history gets made. Season 1 is titled Multcara Companiona. We're looking at a document from each day of the first year of the reign of King Johan I of Aragon and Queen Violante de Bar. Let's begin today's document. Today's document switches things up a little bit because, first of all, it's not in the registers of letters. It's a treasury record. And second of all, the date of the creation of this record is actually not December 29th. There was a December 29th letter from Johan that I could have used, but what's coming up next, it gets a little bit wild as the succession happens. And so I've got a bunch of these letters from Johan and kind of a silence in Violante's letters. And I'm going to get back to that in a little while. But first, I just want to look at today's document and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the succession. So today's document is actually dated the 11th of January, but within it indicates that there's a payment going out to a baker named Simon de Fornells. And the payment is for the baking that he did from the 1st of October, 1386 to the 29th of December 1387. And remember, in our modern calendar that we use today, that sounds like it's over a year. But the new year is at this time and place on December 25th. And so this period for which Simon de Fornells is being paid is actually the 3-month period from October to the end of December of what in our calendar we would consider the same calendar year. So, as a ground rule, I guess you could say, of the podcast, I am free to choose records like this that mention a particular day in the first year of the reign of Joan and Violant. It doesn't necessarily have to have been composed on that exact day for it to appear in the podcast. And I just want to have that freedom so that I'm able to switch things around if I'm ever in a spot where I'm feeling like it's getting a little unbalanced. And thus far, we've kind of alternated between Joan and Violant. But coming up, there's just going to be a few episodes where it's documents from Johan. So I wanted to have another one related to Violante. This particular document, there's, of course, as with any document, a lot going on. Even though it seems like a humdrum entry in a record book and nothing more, keep in mind that the fact that we've got these detailed and itemized records of payments, that is a development. You cannot count on seeing that all throughout the history of time. This kind of record keeping ebbs and flows, and this is an example. What we're looking at here is an example of the increased monetization in the late Middle Ages, where with the increased abundance of paper and also the increased commercialization of the economy, in the late Middle Ages you start to see more and more detail in financial record keeping that just isn't there. There were, in the early Middle Ages, there were bakers for royal families in the early Middle Ages, but we don't see the record keeping at that time. Why? Because there wasn't as much material to write on, and also because there wasn't as much of a culture of record keeping for financial matters. And so those two factors make it so that it's highly unusual to see detailed records like this one in the early or even high Middle Ages. So that's something to keep in mind. And also, I just want to note that this is a gigantic register, and there are just thousands of records of payments that are like this. It's a whole paragraph long. This is not double entry bookkeeping. What's happening here is that there's an authorized agent that works for the treasury. In this situation, it is Johan Callos, or Callos. And the agent appears at the very beginning, right after the phrase, al honrat en. And what that means is it's on his honor. It's not an exact translation there, but the sense of it is that this is a record that is tied to this person's trustworthy reputation as a treasury agent. And it's setting in motion the apparatus of the financial dealings of the royal family. Okay, I think that's enough about this particular document in terms of its summary. Of course, there's questions. There's always questions. The top questions in my mind here are about Simon de Fornells. Was he a chief baker, or was this just one of several bakers on staff? And did this person live in Girona, and that's why the payment is ending on December 29th? Because maybe that's right around when Violant was leaving Girona? More on that in a moment. Is this a high payment, or is this a low payment? And then also, the time period of the payment, it covers a period of time in which Violant was a duchess. But it's written at the time that Violant was queen. And so what in this document reflects that change, if anything? Or does the language of the document actually completely elide over that change? That's something that I would really need to look at a lot more of these records from, say, other queens or later on in Violant's queenship in order to know. But those are the kind of questions that come to mind. All right, now I'm going to pull back from today's document and discuss some of what was going on. In part because tomorrow's document, it's quite a thing. I'm not going to spoil it, but oh my goodness, tomorrow's document is dramatic. And it's actually not about the death of the king, it's something else. But what I will give you is a little bit of background information that is some of my conjecture. Because what becomes clear as you're looking at the registries of letters from Joan and Violant, as we move from the end of December into the first days of January, they are no longer in the same place. Joan stays a little bit longer in Girona and then journeys toward Barcelona. It takes him many days to get there. Violant is in Barcelona ahead of Joan by many days. So she goes ahead of him. That alone raises a flurry of questions in my mind. Why are they journeying separately? I do not know. I'm going to try to figure that out. I'm not sure that it's possible to find something definitive about that. I've got a couple ideas that I'll share over the next couple days. I think that as of around December 28th, Joan and Violant get word that the king really is about to die. And they make some decisions. And one of the decisions is that Violant is going to go to Barcelona first. So she is packing up her stuff, organizing herself for the trip to go from Girona to Barcelona. And those are very active days that she's doing that. I'm not quite sure when she leaves Girona, because moment that reflects the patriarchal mindset of those 19th century and early 20th century historians, we do not have an itinerary for any of the queens. They only made daily itineraries for the men. So we don't know exactly where Violant was, and it's possible that there aren't enough documents for us to know for sure. I'm kind of getting that impression. There's a silence in Violant's registry of letters from around December 28th until about January 6th. So exactly what was going on with Violant, I'm not quite sure. She was traveling, I think. I think she was just busy getting ready to travel and then traveling to get to Barcelona. The reason that Joan and Violant are traveling to Barcelona separately has a lot to do with the familial dynamics, the familial strife that's going on in the royal family. Because, hey, you might have already had this pop into your mind. A lot of sons would go to be at the bedside of their father, on their father's deathbed. But Joan is not doing this. Why? Because Joan and his father, the king, they were estranged. They were fighting with each other. In fact, about 6 months earlier, Joan attempted to visit his father in order to try to resolve some of their differences. And his father was so mad at him that he forbid him entry into the city of Barcelona. During the months of June and July of 1386, Joan was just hanging out in Martorell, like a village on the outskirts of Barcelona, waiting to see if his father would let him in. And after 2 months of doing this, he gave up. He just went back to Girona. And his father basically just decided to hold that grudge until his dying day. So, we're dealing with a person that was... some scholars use the adjective choleric. Per was quite the temperamental person, and his anger was something that shows up in the historical record quite a lot. Well, what was the cause of this difficulty between father and son? Turns out it was about a step-parent. King Per had gotten married to a woman named Sibylla de Fortia. And Sibylla's background was one that was very irksome to a lot of people because she came from a lower rung of nobility. So she was seen as lower class, even though she was still a member of the nobility. She also had a very rascal type of a brother who was causing trouble a lot. So basically, there's dissension in the royal family because of this marriage. A marriage that seems very much inspired by love on the part of King Pear. And so that's the basic behind it, the basic information behind it. I highly recommend a wonderful book chapter by the scholar Nuria Sierras Fernandez. I'll put it in the bibliography of the webpage for this episode. It's a great read because there are so many dramatic twists and turns when it comes to Sibylla de Fortia. And some of those twists and turns we will look at for tomorrow's document. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Historian's Notebook, Season 1, Molt Cara Companiona. If you are leaving with more questions than you arrived with, I've done my job. Remember, the motto of The Historian's Notebook is dissatisfaction guaranteed. That is dissatisfaction. Hopefully there's also some satisfaction sometimes, but the only thing I'm promising is dissatisfaction. Okay, visit the website to see an image of today's document and additional show notes, and listen again tomorrow to hear more about the first year of the reign of King Johan I of Aragon and Queen Violante de Bar. In the meantime, take care.